Daniel, I'll pass it over to you. Just give me confirmation that my screen is showing.
Thanks, Greg. Yep, I can see on the screen the presentation. Before we get started with the overview of the US 14 Corridor Analysis Open House 3, we wanted to provide a few details about how we'll facilitate today's meeting. Really appreciate everyone being able to join us virtually. It looks like we have great attendance today. Really excited about that, so thank you for being here. As you just heard, this meeting is being recorded. And so I want to just make sure that everyone is aware that while you are listening to the presentation, you'll be on mute and your camera will be disabled. The panelists will share a presentation for the next 35 minutes, and then we'll pass it over to a question and answer session. During that question and answer session, if you do use your microphone to ask a question or share a comment, that will be recorded and part of the presentation that will be added to the project website after the meeting. You're welcome to go back and watch the presentation as well. We just want to have that up so everyone who's not able to attend today is able to just get the same information and watch this presentation. As I mentioned during that Q&A, we're going to be able to make sure that people can share their comments, ask their questions. You can also access the project website where there is a comment form if you'd like to mail in a comment and send it back to us. Information is available on the website's public involvement tab to do so. And then just wanted to note during today's presentation, we're going to encourage you to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to ask questions. Please feel free to enter questions into that Q&A function at any time during the meeting. We will start to address those questions at the end of the presentation though. So if questions come up as you're listening along, feel free to type them in and we'll address them at the end. And with that, I will pass it back over to Craig.
Thank you very much. With that being said, we'll get underway. First, we'd like to start with a little bit about the US 14 Corridor Analysis Project as background. We undertook the project roughly about a year to a year and a half ago. The project includes 7 key intersections along the US Highway 14 corridor between Casson and the western edge of Rochester. It includes key intersections at 260th Avenue, Dodge County Highway 15, 270th Avenue, 280th Avenue, County Line Road, Olmsted County Highway 5, 2nd Avenue, 10th Avenue, County Highway 3, 85th Avenue, and Olmsted County 104, otherwise known as 60th Avenue. It is also understood that most recently, Olmsted County changed the designation of County Road 104 to be County State Aid Highway 44. For purposes of historical representation, as we started the project, it was County Road 104. So for that reason, we have maintained that nomenclature and moniker. The primary goal of the US Highway 14 Corridor Analysis Project was to set a vision for the corridor as a whole over the course of the next 20 plus years. In order to do so, we wanted to accomplish certain things, ensure that we improve safety, manage access, improve freight movement, manage congestion into the future, as well as encourage economic development throughout the entirety of the corridor. All the while with a key focus being accomplishing and determining access management options for those key intersections along the corridor. Throughout the process, we had a pretty robust engagement set of strategies that were implemented. We came out for pop-up events early in the project process, conducted a number of surveys, and deployed certain amounts of electronic media, social media, traditional media outreach, our project website, as Dan mentioned, as well as the open houses that you're participating in this evening, as well as our first open house that we were able to have in person as well. All the while, we've engaged nearly 1,500 people as part of the process, with over 1,000 responses received on our 2 surveys that have been conducted, and over 300 plus participating in our email notification list. As part of the process and gathering our information throughout, we heard a number of things from those who took our surveys. The 2 intersections that were most heavily used or often used along the corridor through the extent that I've given you were Olmsted County 5, 2nd Avenue, and 10th Avenue. Significant support was received as we were conducting our survey processes for support to convert the US Highway 14 corridor into a freeway facility with grade separated intersections. During our second survey that was conducted this past summer here in 2020, we received nearly 360 survey responses. We asked a number of questions concerning a multitude of access alternatives that were presented at that time for grade separation of the 14 corridor. And at that time, what was referred to as an A3 and a B1 alternative were the ones that were most heavily supported. Key themes based on our open-ended comments that were received were relative to safety, how any of the alternatives would be implemented over time, what's that implementation schedule, and then access and connectivity between Byron and Casson as well. As I mentioned, that first open house was one that we were able to have in person with you there at the Byron City Hall back in October of 2019. And due to the COVID-19 pandemic here, we have had to move our engagement to an online activity, which in turn has provided us a benefit just the same in some respects, in that our numbers of participation have increased, which is fantastic to see, with over 140 folks participating this evening as well. We appreciate that. With respect to project process, we are at the culmination of the project itself. As you can see here, we started with our kickoff in spring of 2019, and here we are today in the fall, or late fall here of 2020, with our final project report having been posted today in final draft form to our project website, and working through an official mapping process that I'll talk to you about here in a couple of minutes as well. All throughout, we've selected a long-term vision for the corridor. We've developed and evaluated implementation plans. We've identified appropriate implementation plan strategies for future consideration, understanding that things can change over time. And we're in the process of finalizing preparation of official maps for 3 interchange access locations along the corridor. And without further ado, I'm going to jump into what we're all here for this evening, to hear where we're at with the selected long-term vision. As a result of all the analysis and collaboration and participation from the public that has taken place over the past 18 months or so, we have selected and moved forward with a long-term vision, 20+ year vision for the corridor that includes interchanges at County Highway 15, County Highway 5, County Highway 3, and County Road 104, County Highway 44. It's understood that this is implementing this long-term vision has been something that's been on the minds of residents and management of the jurisdictions of this corridor for some time here, for the past 25+ years. And we're at a point now that is pretty landmark in and of itself, having arrived upon a long-term vision to move forward. As part of the process, we've developed very conceptual interchange concepts or designs, so to speak, but they are not ones that are immediately implementable per se. It just gives us an idea to understand what could be implemented at these locations. I'll drill down a little deeper into that right now. For example, at Dodge County 15, we have an interchange concept that provides access to that location. On the south side there, we have an off-ramp coming from the west and an on-ramp going to the east, an off-ramp heading to the west, and an on-ramp circling back underneath the county road heading to the west. This particular concept has maintained access to the residential parcels in the northwest quadrant at this location. And as I pointed out with my initial comment, these interchange comments and associated potential right-of-way impacts are preliminary at best, and very well may change or need to be modified as additional detailed design and analysis is conducted, as well it's going to need to be. Moving further to the east, at Olmsted County Highway 5, we have a situation here with the concept alternative that indicates a potential for realignment of the Highway 14 corridor further to the south, south of its current location. Now, again, understanding these are concept in nature, but it gives us an idea and understanding of what could be conceived and what could be implemented over time at this particular location. You'll also note on this graphic that we have potential implementation and construction or extension of Country Club Road further to the west, tying into County Road 5. And on the same graphic, for illustration purposes, we have included, as shown in white or gray, a potential extension of that roadway further to the west, but not much detail or consideration or design has been put into that aspect of this concept. Again, understanding that these are preliminary at best and may change or need to be modified once an interchange project were to move forward. And lastly, the third interchange along this line, understanding that County Road 104 is one as well, is Olmsted County 3. That location has our railroad tracks immediately to the north, relatively close to the existing alignment of Highway 14. This concept that's being presented indicates an off-ramp coming to the south from the west, an on-ramp south of Highway 14 for eastbound travel, and an off-ramp heading westbound coming in south of the railroad tracks, and then an on-ramp heading westbound, again, south of those railroad tracks. According to this conceptual layout too, we achieve grade separation of not only Highway 14, but also of the railroad tracks. Again, understanding that these are conceptual in nature and may need to be modified into the future as a future interchange project moves forward. Now, a key point as part of the presentation is relevant or relative to the implementation strategy or approach. Understanding that the time frame for the selected long-term vision is well out beyond or to the year 2040 and beyond. That's 20 plus years from where we stand today. Implementation of that selected long-term vision is expected to be incremental and occur in stages over time. It's estimated that implementation stages could be centered around a short-term consideration, a mid-term consideration, and a long-term consideration. Short-term being 5+ years, mid-term being 10+ years, and long-term being 20+ years. Improvements that have been identified and are outlined as part of the project documentation are identified in stages and could advance or would advance toward that ultimate vision over time, becoming a freeway. The project partners have identified 2 different implementation strategies. Option A, considering implementing an interchange at Olmsted County Highway 3 first, or option B, implementing an interchange at Olmsted County Highway 5 first, each of which having different implementation measures associated with each. The following boards that I'm going to touch base on here for a couple of minutes walk us through those short, mid, and long-term stages for each of those implementation strategies. First off, option A, Olmsted County Highway 3 being an interchange constructed first. In the short-term phase, 5+ years or so, key consideration would be here is understanding on this graphic what's identified and shown on this view as green, constructed this time frame. That's the improvement that's being included as part of this short-term time frame. Shown here, the gray or black icons or indications are those those improvements or those traffic control measures that are currently in place today. It's either already constructed or existing. So in the short-term condition under this option A, we are identifying the understood condition or consideration of constructing an interchange at County Road 104, County Highway 44, and then potentially considering paving 14th Street between County Highway 3 and County Road 104 to support the local roadway system. In addition, we would potentially or could potentially move forward with modification in the near term of an access modification at the intersection of US Highway 14 and County Road 3, modifying that access to some type of other innovative intersection control in order to improve safety at that location. The traffic signals located at 10th Avenue and 2nd Avenue or County Road 5 would be maintained and held over to the future. And then consideration of a access control modification at 260th Avenue at a minimum to a right in, right out, or some other consideration for that location. Moving then on to that next stage, that midterm condition. The midterm condition is considered a 10+ year time frame from where we stand today, understanding that things could change, time frames could extend or shorten, more than likely, depending on money available. It's undetermined. Again, recall, green indicates an improvement that is potentially implemented during this time frame, and gray indicates an already constructed improvement or an existing condition. Here again, at this particular phase, now the interchange could potentially be constructed in that 10+ year time frame or window at the County Road 3 location, and with a consideration of a modification of the access at 10th Avenue from its existing signalized intersection to some other right in, right out condition at a minimum with the new interchange at County Road 3, maintaining the traffic signal at County Road 5 under this condition, and again, having the already modified intersection at 260th Avenue in the previous phase. A second stage of this time frame, once that interchange is fully constructed and operational at County Road 3, is consideration of modifying the access at County Road 5 as well from its existing signalized intersection to some other type of innovative intersection design in order to improve mobility and safety along the corridor. The long-term condition, again, 20+ years from where we stand today, continuing on with this implementation strategy or our option for if the interchange at County Road 3 were implemented first. Now considering implementation of an interchange at County Road 5 in this time frame, and potentially expanding the roadway along 2nd Avenue further to the north to accommodate the traffic volume moving through this intersection under stage 1 of this implementation time frame. Under stage 2 of this implementation time frame, once the interchange is open at County Road 5, as well as the interchange that was implemented at County Road 3, consideration of access modification or closure at 10th Avenue, modification of the existing access to a right in, right out at 280th Avenue, and then potentially considering construction of an interchange at County Road 15 as well. Again, stage 2 of our long-term 20+ year vision for this Olmsted County Road 3 interchange constructed first implementation strategy, option A. Now, a few comments now, I think understanding where we're at with the visuals and how they unfold themselves. I'll move on to option B, consideration of Olmsted County 5 becoming an interchange first. In the short term, once again, we would understand that an interchange would be constructed at County Road 104 first in the 5+ year short-term time frame. Consideration again of paving 14th Street between County Road 3 and County Road 104. Again, in the short-term time frame, in the interest of safety and improving mobility along the corridor, considering modification of the County Road 3 intersection at Highway 14 to some other innovative intersection control type, and then maintaining those traffic signals at the 10th Avenue and County Road 5 2nd Avenue intersection. And again, modification of the access at 260th Avenue as well to a right in, right out condition at a minimum. The second phase or midterm phase of this potential option would be then consideration of the interchange being constructed at County Road 5 with that potential corridor expansion or increased capacity of 2nd Avenue further to the north in stage 1, that 10+ year time frame. And then in the second stage of this 10+ year time frame, out from where we are today, consideration of removing the traffic signal at 10th Avenue and modifying that to a right in, right out as at a minimum at this stage or phase. The long-term time period then, 20+ years out from that time, consideration of constructing the interchange at County Road 3 in stage 1, and following construction of the interchange at County Road 3, stage 2 would then be consideration of removing the access or closing the access at 10th Avenue in that 20+ year time frame and modifying the access at 280th Avenue and constructing the interchange at County Road 15 in Dodge County. It's a lot of information to take in. I understand that. It's a lot at one time. The good news is this evening's presentation is recorded and can be watched back again to absorb some of that, along with the project documentation that is available on our website. And again, keep in mind that these implementation strategies, again, are preliminary at best and may change over time as the ultimate corridor vision is implemented, depending on safety, traffic growth, or development throughout the corridor limits. One thing that is being conducted as part of the process is what we call official mapping process. So the official mapping process establishes an anticipated right-of-way acquisition needed for future transportation infrastructure improvements. It is not something that requires acquisition of that right-of-way in the immediate terms, but it's prepared by a licensed land surveyor and adopted by local jurisdictions that have zoning authorities such as the counties, cities, or townships. And then after adoption, the official map is filed with the county recorder, who notes the existence of the official map on each of the property titles that may be affected. An official map is being prepared for the interchange locations, as I mentioned, at County 15 in Dodge County, County 5 and County 3 in Olmsted County, to go on record for those locations. And again, as I've mentioned in some of my previous comments, an official map does not indicate a project absolutely will occur or that right-of-way will absolutely be required in the identified locations on the official map. Just to bring us back full circle from a timeline and next steps perspective, as I mentioned, we are at the culmination of the project here in the fall of 2020. We are finalizing our project documentation, official mapping exercises, and we are here meeting with you this evening, sharing our information and opening our ears for listening. We hope that you can continue to check us out on our project website to review the information that's not only presented here this evening, but also being documented as part of our project documentation. And share your comments with us either here this evening or through the two options we have on our project website that are available through electronic means of submitting a comment to us or filling out the hard copy form that can be printed off of our website. And I must admit, I am remiss in not taking a moment at the beginning of this meeting. I was so excited to speak to all of you tonight that I did not introduce my partners in this project, Kay Beniak, our project manager with Olmsted County, and myself properly, being the project manager on our consultant team as Craig Vaughn with SRF Consulting Group. I would, though, like to take this time at this moment, although I am at the end of my presentation, to go through that process of introducing our partners on this project. Kay, would you please join me?
Well,
Your microphone should be loud.
Yep, I can get my microphone, but not my video. But as Craig said, welcome. Should have done this at the beginning, but he started. I wasn't going to interrupt. So, but again, thanks for joining us this evening. I know this format is a little bit unusual for a lot of us. It worked well last time, and as Craig mentioned, I can see we've got great participants on the screen tonight. So yeah, we'll let Craig wrap up, and then we can do some Q&A. I'm sure Craig would walk through the rest of our participants, but you know, when we started this endeavor, we didn't start in a vacuum here. We've got partners from the Minnesota Department of Transportation, as well as Dodge County and our cities of Byron, Casson, even Rochester has been participating in it, as well as township officials too in our planning department. So it takes a village. And this is our best shot at what we think that vision for that corridor might be. It's really important for us to reach this step where it's really a milestone for us. And I'm very proud of the work that this team has done. So, but yeah, I'll let Craig wrap up and we can do some Q&A too. Thanks.
I appreciate that, Kay. Thank you very much. And again, my sincere apologies for not conducting the welcome and introductions at the beginning. Like I said, I was just so excited to engage with all of you this evening. I just dove right in. So once again, my apologies. I'm going to step to one more slide here where my partner here, Dan McNeil, is going to walk us through the open house Q&A process and hopefully help us facilitate a hearty and respectful conversation this evening.
Thanks, Craig. Yeah, we had a few questions come into the Q&A already, so I would just encourage folks as we provide a little bit more instructions to feel free to go ahead and start typing any additional questions that come to mind right into that Q&A, and we'll take them in the order received. You'll be able to find that Q&A function on the bottom of your screen. That should allow you to easily type in. So we will go through those typed in questions first. We have a few folks joining us over the phone today that would not be able to type in a question. If they would like to make a comment or share a question, they can hit *9 on their phone, and that would raise their hand, letting us know that they'd like to share a comment. So to start with, we received a question related to board 7. It's a little bit more general pedestrian question, but it came in at that board. What in the design accommodates bicyclists? The closure of 10th Avenue significantly impacts bicyclists riding from Byron to Rochester. It is typical to cross at 10th Avenue to access County 34 to Rochester. Without a bicycle or pedestrian crossing, we have to go north to 7th Street and then cross at County 3. That adds a full mile to the commute to Rochester. So just to recap, I think the question is, how does the design accommodate bicycle travel near 10th?
Okay, I'm going to start to field these and kind of take them as we go. I can answer this question at a starting point. Again, understanding that our interchange or intersection designs are conceptual in nature, but each will accommodate a sidewalk trail facility in some way, shape, or form at each of the locations that have been identified. And as further consideration could be made, and I'll go out on the limb here, for as detailed analysis and design is completed under future conditions as an interchange option begins to move forward, other considerations for crossings as needed could also be considered. At this point, I'm making the statement that the interchanges that are located at Dodge County 15, Olmsted County 5, and Olmsted County 3 would by all means have pedestrian and bicyclist accommodations along those roadways. Kay, do you have anything additional to add to that?
Oh, no, I don't think so. I think you've answered that. I think all of our facilities will assess what those needs are for pedestrian and bicycle and, non-motorized movement. So to be determined.
So moving on to the next question then. Where can we get more details on the County 44 US 14 interchange?
I'm thinking that one's mine, Craig.
Yes, thank you, Kay.
So, and I did notice that there's several questions about that intersection. For some of you that, have noticed in the legislature and, you're kind of following things with respect to that intersection, you're aware probably, and if not, I can step through that a little bit. So we have been very actively, and when I say we, I mean Olmsted County, both our commissioners and our public works staff have a very real concern, along with MnDOT, about the safety of that intersection. And we've been lobbying very hard to get some funding dedicated to put an interchange at that intersection, as well as removing the 7th Street intersection as part of that. So kind of do a flyover at 7th Street and connect it up into a great big interchange at 104. This past session, finally during the 5th special session when the bonding bill was passed, there is some funding in that bonding bill to move forward with some efforts at that location. There's a dollar value of $6 million in what we call general obligation bonds. Those are bonds that are funding that's meant for the local agency to cover costs associated with that interchange that would fall, on the locals' shoulders to foot the bill. Obviously, then there's a lot of trunk highway costs associated with MnDOT's facility. They also received some funding, although certainly not near enough for construction activities and everything, but some trunk highway bonds went into a pot of money for project development. So what MnDOT is anticipating is that they can utilize, the district here can utilize some of those monies for getting started on engineering work, maybe some utility coordination, preliminary design, maybe some right-of-way acquisition. We'll just at least start to get the project ready and to get it to what we call shovel ready, so that when we do get construction dollars, we'll be ready to hit the ground running. So that just happened obviously in October. We do have an official map there and we've done some preliminary work, but we're kind of getting our feet on the ground here now and just where we go from now. From at this point, how does MnDOT access those trunk highway bonds and how do we get that funding, the county for our local stuff? So we're having those conversations now and hopefully we'll get on track and we'll start that process and do the preliminary engineering work for that interchange. So apologize for a long-winded kind of answer, but it's really exciting to see that, that we're going to move forward with something at that location.
Thanks, Kay. The next question that we had come in is, how do we get copies of all of the public surveys, comments, and documents that were created for the project?
I can take that one. That information will be included as part of our documentation materials as an appendix item. The survey responses will be a readout and report out from there, as well as the survey questions. It's all part of the documentation process.
Thanks, Craig. I would also encourage you to check out our public involvement tab, which has a lot of links to the materials that we've shared at past open houses as well, and that's readily available on the website today. The next question we received is, what about the intersection at County Road 104 near Leashes and Leeds? I think that was more of a general comment.
That can be answered by Kay. It's part of the 104 interchange. Kay, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, so that's the one that I just rambled on about. Sorry. But so that, that's the east end bookend of our corridor analysis work. And, like I mentioned, that we are moving forward with improvements at that intersection.
Okay, that rolls into the next question that we received. If funding is an issue, any chance of adding acceleration lanes at County Road 104? Just this morning, I was cut off while turning to go left on 14 due to an impatient driver also making a left during heavy traffic.
Right. And, we're very cognizant of that and the timing of our funding and dollars. We've certainly had those conversations with MnDOT about, well, maybe we need an interim safety kind of measure at that location. I would definitely say that if we hadn't received some bonding dollars to start some of this preliminary design work, that would certainly be, right at the forefront of our minds. Having received some dollars, that does help us and give us some optimism. Not to say that we can't do some small safety improvements. We want to be mindful of our taxpayer dollars, that we're not, putting in, because even acceleration lanes can certainly cost a pretty penny, and then you don't want to put something in that could potentially get, removed down the line with another project here or something. So, but yes, I think the long and short of it is that if there are some interim improvements that we can do there that are low cost, especially if we're on a good path now to potentially get some funding. You know, we would certainly consider something like that too. And I do think we have acceleration lanes there, maybe at, I don't know, MnDOT maybe might be better able to answer that, but that sounds kind of familiar, but maybe not. So.
Sounds good. One other question we had is, why is there not an option for County Road 3 to be a right in, right out until the interchange can be implemented? Oh, Craig, looks like you're on mute.
I apologize. That is the phrase of 2020. I think I'm on mute. Alrighty, I'll take that one here actually. So that's something that I was hoping would be asked as a question, and we did make the comment about, and I think the way you phrased the question, Dan, maybe I already started reading into a potential answer. If you have to rephrase that, let me know, why is there no option for County Road 3 to be a right in, right out until the interchange can be implemented? Well, that actually is exactly what is occurring. Let me go back to this drawing here, and then I'll also make a comment. Let's just hit this one. So in the under both implementation options for option A and option B, we have identified that intersection at County Road 3 to be modified from its current condition of what we call a full access, where you can access it in every way, and potentially right in, right out could be one of those types of intersection modifications. And as it stands right now, I think I can get ready to open this up for the DOT to comment as well here. But the Minnesota Department of Transportation has received funding to make a modification at that intersection. That funding is programmed, I think, roughly for the year 2024. And they are looking at and reviewing access modifications at that location right now as an interim condition. Does any of our partners, Heather, Mike, Greg, want to tag on to that comment or answer?
Well, playing with the mute button here. This is, hi, this is Greg Paulson. I'm with the Minnesota Department of Transportation. I'm the Assistant District Engineer for the Southeast District here in Minnesota. And as Craig said, actually, you know, we obviously have had concerns too about the safety at that intersection. There's been a number of, you know, bad crash issues there. And we did receive funding. I think this past spring, last winter, early spring, we went through application for federal safety funds. So we did receive some safety funding to do some modifications at the intersection in fiscal year 24. And we know that's, you know, that's a ways out. So actually we are starting to work on development of that project right now. But, you know, we do have to kind of step through the process. I mean, we will want to get public input to look at, you know, to get input on some of the solutions we'd take a look at for that interim safety project, get input from the public. Also, you know, get feedback from folks that use the intersection a lot, the ag traffic, the local business access. And so we'll be starting that process soon. And, you know, what we would like to do is try to get that project ready to go earlier if we can, you know, happen to get funding to move the project up. But currently it's funded for 24, and we could still potentially, with that funding date, we could potentially construct it late in 23. But that's kind of where we're at right now, Craig. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
We received one comment in the Q&A. The comment here says, is it possible to consider interchange at County Road 5 first and close 10th Avenue to reduce traffic lights on 14?
Okay, I think that's a bit of a comment more so than a question. I will go to the one that has the interchange at that location. So under this implementation scenario that includes the County Road 5 interchange being constructed first for this long-term vision, Again, understanding that in the short term, 5+ years, maintaining the two signals along that corridor at 10th and County Road 5. And then in that next implementation timeframe, midterm, 10+ years out, as other improvements are made along the corridor at County Road 104 and County Road 3, then looking to implement the interchange at County Road 5 as shown here, maintaining that signalized intersection during construction and while that takes place. And then the second stage of that would be is following the interchange being fully functional and operational, potentially considering modifying the intersection at 10th Avenue to some other type of traffic control with removing that signal at that location. Not fully closing the intersection, but modifying the access there.
Sure. Thanks, Greg. And we've received a few more questions coming in. Appreciate that. We'll continue. We've got plenty of time to continue to address these questions. The next one is noting, did you state the official new highway of 104 and 60th and what that was called? Similarly, we had the question, is CSAH 44 legally renamed?
Yes.
So
Can you want to take it?
Yep. So our County Road 104 or 60th Avenue corridor from Salem Road on the south side or CSAH 25 all the way over and across Highway 14, all the way up to the north, up to where it hits 14th Street, no, 75th Street, sorry, County 14. All that has been numbered and named as our County State Aid Highway 44, where it used to be a portion of it was County Road 104, a portion of it was called 60th Avenue and a township road. That entire segment now is considered CSAH 44. And yep, that has gone through all the proper paperwork and everything so that we do actually have what we call commissioner's orders renaming it. As Craig mentioned early on, and in some of our graphics, you'll still see that reference to County Road 104, simply because there's some historical, to using that name and people are familiar with it and stuff. So, that slow transition to a new name anyway. So, yep.
Thanks, Kay. We also received a question based on previous engagement. I think this would be related to Board 7. Did the survey show 10th Avenue having permanent limited access?
I'll take that one, Dan. Thank you for that. Yes, it did. So during our open house on June 10th of this year, 2020, we presented a number of potential access alternatives, some of which had varying interchanges at different locations. Case in point would be is that the A3 alternative, as I referenced on an earlier slide, this one happened to be at the time our B1 alternative. As you can see here, this B1 alternative did indicate the access control at those locations all along. This is the selected long-term vision that came out of not only our public engagement, which resulted in B1 and A3 both rising to the surface as the two most supported alternatives along the corridor. B1 here did indicate that there would be interchanges at County Road 104, County Road 3, County Road 5, and County Road 15, with access modifications, either partial access or closure at 260th, 280th, and 10th Avenue.
Thanks, Craig. Also received a question. As part of the goals listed is new economic development. Why was not conserving existing economic stability a primary goal?
I'm going to start to take that one, Kay. I'm going to ask for any support from yourself or any of our other partners here on the call today. And the way in which I would answer that is, it was, it's never lost on us that any decisions that are made regarding access modification or the choices we make regarding the transportation system have pros and cons. Those are taken into account and it's evaluated, what we call an evaluation matrix, understanding too that I had referenced in my previous answer to the previous question that there were other alternatives out there. Case in point, I don't happen to have the graphic here right in front of me. It's available on our website. But if I were to reference what the A3 alternative was, it was an interchange at County Road 104, 10th Avenue, and then I believe 280th potentially, and then possibly just finishing out with those two interchanges. So again, that had, that one weighs in a certain way versus this particular alternative too. So where you have pros on one alternative, you have the pros on another, then they typically oftentimes not offset one another, but oftentimes go against one another. So how I would answer that in a long-winded form here is that it was understood, it was considered at a high level, not drilling down to a quantitative level, but it was evaluated as part of the process, in addition to the goal or the identified and stated goal of wanting economic development opportunities throughout the broad base understanding of the project extent. I don't know if any of our other partners want to lean in on that comment or the way in which I answered that. I'll pause for a moment, take a drink of water, and see if anyone else turns their microphone off. Otherwise, feel as though that's asked and answered. Hearing nothing, Dan, please go ahead and proceed here.
Absolutely. Next question is asking if it's possible to share cost analysis of the phased approach with cost of money over time versus doing all construction up front, if that could be completed and communicated.
Yes, that was. Now I want to make sure I understand the question. So from a cost basis standpoint, we have run an estimation in current dollars, not in forecasted dollars necessarily, but in current dollars and at planning level estimates to understand, and each implementation stage, what the cost to implement a particular improvement is. And then we've added that up as a compounded cost over the entirety of that particular alternative or that particular implementation strategy. And that is being documented as part of our project documentation as well.
Thanks,
whether
Greg.
or not, though, I think the way the question was, let me make sure I answer that appropriately, though. The way the question was asked, and I don't have the questions up on my screen here. Actually, I just found it. Please share the cost analysis phase approach with cost money over time versus doing all construction up front. Okay, so one thing to consider there would be is yeah, I suppose we do have that information at one point. It's just not laid out in that fashion in the document, because you typically will look at a phased approach to implementing these types of projects. I'm going to ad lib here and answering this question a little bit differently too, and I'll ask once again for my partners to chime in. Understanding that implementing these improvements over time and just feeling that, on a broad scale, that an interchange improvement is roughly $25 to $30 million by itself. Implementing 3 to 4 interchanges, as you can see here, just alone is a number that is not feasible given many, if any, conditions regarding how money flows for transportation improvements. That's why you would that's why you look at implementation plans over time.
Thanks, Craig. The next question is, Mail provides employees bus service to communities along Highway 14. Is there consideration for park and ride facilities in the Byron area?
Okay. So with respect to this one is, I apologize, I was reading another comment a little further down. Communities along Highway 14. So at this point, what I would say is that, given we have taken into account opportunities for transit opportunities through here. There's the existing park and ride that's at 10th Avenue, but understanding how certain lands may be able to develop or where opportunities might arise, not knowing quite how the interchanges are going to be designed off into the future, the land around them, understanding how we might be able to implement a park and ride in the Byron area could be considered at a later date. And I would ask Mary and or Bill to chime in here where the question is relevant to Byron itself.
Yeah, Craig, this is Bill. I mean, that's always a consideration for the city. So as this moves forward, I think just like you said, the city would be looking for an alternate park and ride location.
Thank you, Bill.
We received one comment in response to our earlier bike ped crossing comment, just noting that it did not address the general issue of bicycle commuters from Byron to Rochester. All options mentioned here today are adding an additional mile to that commute.
Okay, from Byron to Rochester. I'm going to make an attempt here to respond and just discuss this comment a little bit. I'll ask again any of my partners to chime in. So the question now is about connectivity east-west and understanding that adding the additional mile, as I'm assuming the half mile back to come back a half mile the other direction to gain access through one of these other locations to cross the roadway. Understanding that we were looking at access modifications along the 14 corridor, our purview not only was north-south along across Highway 14, but we did look at the broader system to try to understand where we may have potential for state trails or other trail development, given comprehensive planning activities in the area, as well as you'll see as you read the documentation of the survey questions. We, in our first survey, as part of our pop-up in, I think it was summer of 2019 at one of the events there, Dan, that you and I attended. We asked a lot of questions regarding multimodal activity, bicycle pedestrian activity throughout. We didn't get a significant response regarding that. That's not to say that it moved down in our order of magnitude on our consideration, but it was considered throughout. And once again, back to my comment previously about the various alternatives that were under consideration, each of them have a pro and a con at some point too. So for those folks that are immediately looking to travel north-south at County Road 5, you know, they're seeing it likely differently than those individuals that wanted to use 10th Avenue and vice versa for those two alternatives. So your point's well understood and it's not lost. I understand.
Moving right along. When will the decision as to how to modify 260th Avenue be made? Modifying it to the right-hand turns is significantly less disruptive than closing it completely. Are there options on the table besides the two shown? And you said 5 years. Do you think it will be closer to 1 or 5 years?
I'm going to start to answer this question, and I'm going to ask my MnDOT partners to chime in. If you would join me here if I don't answer it appropriately. So this is the location out here at 260th Avenue. I believe on our implementation strategy, we do identify that location for the most part. I'm kind of clicking through it just so you kind of see that there. It's on the far left-hand portion of the screen. For the most part, it's being identified as a right in, right out location. That is a location that does service and has the potential to provide access to agricultural parcels on either side. I had a very good conversation at the October 2019 open house with a property owner in that area that talked about that and shared that with me. And I carried that with me throughout the entire project, and our project team did as well. Our recommendation as part of this process has been to consider a modification at that location to some type of right in, right out at a minimum. That, as you can imagine, is to improve safety for folks utilizing that intersection, given the traffic on Highway 14, as well as to improve mobility for those folks that are on Highway 14, as not to have that conflict of friction there. When that's to occur, I can only answer that, you know, at this point and stage in the game, we, for the most part, as part of our process and our analyses, work through the implementation strategies and make recommendations as transportation professionals on how we see things potentially being able to unfold over time. That's one of which is a similar to County Road 3, something that could be done in the near term to potentially yield an improvement or a safety benefit along the corridor. I can't state if that's going to be a year, 5, or any time further. That's unknown at this time is the best answer I can give. I don't know if our MnDOT partners wants to chime in on that. Heather, Mike, Greg? Hearing nothing. Oh, go ahead, Greg.
Well, I was just wondering if maybe our traffic engineer, Mike, would want to comment on that. You know, I'm not aware of, you know, kind of what the current crash issues are. I mean, that's, you know, a lot of it that we would probably view this on would be you know, what kind of safety issues, crash issues that we'd see at that location. And, you know, I'm not aware that that's been a large problem, but it would generally be looked at as kind of a proactive safety measure, even if, you know, there isn't a high incident right now. But I don't know if Mike's on.
Yeah,
If he
yeah,
could comment.
I can respond, Greg. This is Mike Schwein. I'm the district traffic engineer for MnDOT here in Rochester. And thank you for asking the question about 260th Avenue. Generally, most of our standalone safety improvements in the district, which is typical of other districts throughout the state, is funded by, you know, federal dollars through a program that we can apply for. And generally, the intersections we study the hardest and we submit for potential funding are the highest priority intersections where there's generally already a known serious crash history. There are cases where we can submit a project as what we call a proactive project. But those are typically the proactive projects that we apply for are typically more system-wide. They cover more miles. They're lesser cost projects such as high tension cable barrier, rumble strips, striping, etc. And so that's typically where the proactive dollars are applied. And so right now, in terms of 260th, in terms of these federal dollars, our typical safety program, there's nothing that's been, you know, submitted as a future project. And so in terms of the federal dollars, you know, we don't have anything identified in the near term currently. Also, part of that was waiting for the outcome of this study, you know, just to see what recommendations were made in terms of short-term and long-term improvements and what the priorities would be, and also feedback from the public. So that's my summation at this time. But thank you for asking the question.
Thank you, Mike. This is Craig Vaughn once again. The one comment I would make there too is based on our review of this safety data that we had on hand from the project, it didn't show a high significant crash incidents, but it did have a crash that did occur there was a more severe crash. That's where it also rose as one of the potential opportunities. As one of our recommendations, I would just offer that, Mike, but it's not similar in nature or comparable to County Road 3 by any means. Hopefully that helps.
I'll go ahead and keep moving through the Q&A. If we do not receive enough funding or experience unforeseen costs and delays prevent us from completing the entire project, what will be prioritized for completion?
I'm actually going to ask if Kay and or the DOT would like to answer this question. Okay, you first.
I was hoping Greg would unmute first. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I think that's a good question. I think that kind of falls a little bit into some of the strategies that we've tried to figure out about implementation, to be honest. You know, it's really hard and it's really difficult to fund these super big kind of projects like this, as we all know. So when you start to look at things, it's like, shoot, you know, could we get funding for 3 before we get funding for 5? Would it come the other way? Would, you know, would some change, would a development and create different traffic patterns cause something to change up? I think that's a hard question to answer. I think if we can do any kind of, you know, obviously we're all engineers and we'd love to just like have a great big pot of money and just get the bulldozers out there and start building, man, because, you know, we all recognize the need out in this corridor. But that's probably not going to happen. So we kind of got to pick and choose, like, you know, do we have some concentrated safety problems at any particular location? Well, then we want to try and do something that might help that. If there's an economic development reason and there's some economic development money that we can do this one, you know, then we want to try and do that. So, you know, I'm not sure I have a great answer for your question on how to prioritize, because I think that there's just a ton of different things that could kind of play into different scenarios. So
Okay, this is Greg. You did a great job in answering that. I was going to say it depends really. I mean, as we talked earlier, I mean, obviously 104 is the one location that's, kind of risen to the top of the priority list, and, that we're starting to get some funding on. Then it would be 5 or 3, and a lot of it will depend upon, kind of what happens out on the corridor, because it's going to be a number of years before anything is probably going to happen. A lot of it is, because of the lack of funding for projects like this. So, if 104 gets funded, and, so that'll be take a few years to get that up and going and funded. And then, one of these other locations would, probably be next on the list to try to get funding for. But, over the years, things happen, and, it can have an effect. And this whole plan, I mean, really, it's a vision for the corridor that eventually, with the growth in this area and, the traffic and safety issues out on 14, it's going to have to be a freeway vision for the corridor, similar to, our Highway 52 freeway vision. But, different things can happen that could influence what the priority becomes. If there's a development in Byron that, that ends up impacting something, or, obviously, and there was a comment, there's signals in Byron. So, there are a lot of, there's probably some good reasons that 5 could potentially go first. But again, it's going to be a few years. So, we'll have to see what happens as time progresses here. And, the other thing is there could also be opportunity, this is kind of a high level planning study, really to get to finalize what kind of design you're going to have on the interchanges. We'd have to go into deeper engineering project development. And, that could, if we did that on one or the other intersections, that could also kind of give us some maybe little better ideas on where the priorities should be. So anyway.
Thanks for that, Greg.
Yep, thank you.
We had a few questions come in related to this next one. Looks like Craig has his screen up on Olmsted County 5, where asked to show that intersection design again, and question regarding what the thoughts were behind shifting Highway 14 to the south and rerouting it through properties on each side of County Road 5. Similarly, ask a couple of questions asking what would happen to the existing highway if it was moved south on County Road 5.
Okay, thanks for that, Dan. So you're combining those two questions together, and that'll clean. Okay, thank you, Dan.
Yep.
I did bring this up, seeing that in the string here as well. So once again, I'm going to remind everyone that as part of the process, what we do is, thanks for Greg's comments here too, that this is a planning activity that whereby we conduct, analysis and get a good feel for where things are at. And we perform traffic operations analysis and conceptual intersection and interchange design so that we can set that future vision for how things might unfold out into the future and set the stage for future activities, as Greg pointed out, detailed design aspects, understanding where access should be, looking at the safety, mobility, things of that nature to help guide our decisions, right? Without having any planning, we might not have an understanding of what our direction is and where we're going. So with this being that foray into that planning activity for this section, what we've kind of come to is then working into the conceptual interchange design. So this question is centered around the interchange design that is put out here for consideration at County Road 5, and it includes consideration of shifting the US 14 alignment to the south, and then conceiving some interchange design or concept in that area, a frontage road extension south of with Country Club Road being extended. It's currently shown on the property line here. Having an offset distance from the existing frontage road to the north, which was, I think, in one of the comments here, has been identified as a significant connection through the community as well, maintaining that location and that connection, and then accommodating the interchange. Now, it's not lost on me once again that this has impacts. This creates a different scenario than if you kept 14 at this location and you developed an interchange concept at that location. If you have an opportunity to take a look through the June 2020 open house materials, as part of those open house materials, you'll see a different interchange concept that was conceived and considered around that time. As we proceeded with our additional analysis and review and discussion that we have with the public, et cetera, taking all things into account, we started to look at an alternative concept that shifted the alignment, therefore arriving upon something like this in concept. Again, conceptual at best, understanding that future detailed design and consideration will be necessary, which we'll look at alternatives once again here. But at this point in time, it was determined that something conceptually like this has good potential, or I shouldn't say that, has potential, and could be implemented depending on how things unfold into the future, understanding that it does have impacts. I think that answers the portion about how or why 14 was shifted. Your other question, Dan, I think was relevant or relative to what happens to the old 14 right-of-way or area or land area. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. Well, at this time, I think the honest answer is it's too early to say, what'll happen with that excess right-of-way. We haven't, the interchange concepts at this location, if the roadway is realigned, obviously that realignment of the roadway could shift a little bit one way or the other. A slightly different interchange design could be conceived. So you, at that point, would need to determine what's happening with that other area that would otherwise be vacated where 14 currently is. There's other land holdings and fee ownership that comes into play there as well, before there's any potential for who acquires the land, who takes potential ownership rights for selling it off, etc., things like that. And if I'm not using the proper terms, I'd ask maybe Mary or any others that want to chime in on this answer. But I think that kind of answers that. As you can see here, there would become some land area through these two areas that this question is coming about, and what happens to that land. Mary, Bill, anyone else want to chime in on that?
No, I think you covered it. And like you said, it could be sold off depending on development and how they design it.
Greg, you?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is Greg from MnDOT again. I think you did a good job answering that, Craig.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, first of all, we'd have to get through the kind of the final design phase to make sure that, we wouldn't need any of the existing right of way. But then, if there was right of way that, excess right of way that we could end up disposing of, the public purpose piece of it, we would have to, it does get a little bit complicated. You do have to look at who's the underlying fees. There's different laws and statutes that kind of guide us on property rights and ownership rights, before we sell it off. And then there's different options, with selling it off to, as far as it could go out to bid, if there's a public purpose, that could change some of it too, where the property would go and stuff. So little early to be able to kind of fully answer that question, but it's a good question.
Agreed. Thank you, Greg.
Another question we received was that there were some early concept designs for County 44 a few years ago. Is that information available to review now?
I do think that is still out on our website. If you go out to the county website and under Public Works in Transportation, I do think we still have some of those graphics out there. If not, you can certainly grab my contact information and shoot me an email, and I can send anybody that too if they're interested. But I do believe it's still out there on our website.
Thanks, Kay. We got a couple of questions related to paving 14th Street. So the general question asking why pave that, and then another question or more of a comment, but related to it, if that would help bicycle pedestrian traffic as well.
I can tackle that one. Dan, from a bicycle pedestrian standpoint, assuming that a trail facility was accommodated with that roadway, that would help significantly. At this point, what's all included in that particular or potential road paving or improvement of that roadway has not been absolutely defined, but to answer that follow-up for the previous question about the connection between Byron and Rochester, there is some potential there. Obviously, you got to fill other gaps as well if they exist further to the west of County Road 3. The reason why paving that is being recommended with the interchange construction potential at or being constructed at 104 County Highway 44 and the access modification at County Highway 3, there is some desire lines or potential trends or opportunity for traffic to, not having the additional access point at this location, and with development on the eastern side of Byron, similar to the individual that commented about the bicyclist having to go back to go forward, would vehicles otherwise travel along 14th to get through a newly constructed interchange out further to the east and then proceed on to the east from there. And based on our analysis throughout the project, with a whole host of different data points that we had available to us, including origin destination data and an analysis thereof, it just indicated that 14th Street had the potential to be a desire line for travel.
Thanks, Craig. Next question is asking, will the alignment of County 34 at 280th Avenue, north of 14, be adjusted to join Vole Drive and the frontage road to the east?
I'll attempt to answer that question right now, and then I'll ask if Dodge County and City of Byron want to follow up with any comment hereafter. I know as part of this project, considering that location was not determined to have any modification beyond its access at 14 and a potential future closure, which is out into the future ways. We did not include a local improvement for realigning those two. Currently, the traffic volumes that move through there, based on our analysis, indicate that many of the people come from the west, presumably from Casson or further beyond, and then access 14 at that location due to the acceleration lane that's on 14 at that full access intersection. But I'll pause for a moment and see if Bill, Mary, or Guy would like to chime in any further beyond that.
I'll just, this is Guy Kohlenhofer, the Dodge County engineer. And I'll just say it had to do a lot with the regional traffic and where we determined or could determine that would want to go, provided the route was available and safe to get on to 14 rather than where it is going now because a different intersection was made safe. It has to do a lot with regional connectivity of the county roads.
This is Bill Angerman, Byron City Engineer. It would not be a high priority for the city of Byron. And just a little elaborate, why was Vole Drive, why is it there to begin with? And when that industrial park was platted in 2001, the city council decided they needed to leave all their options open. So they needed to make sure an option for an interchange at the County Line Road, County Road 5, 10th Avenue, County Road 3 were all on the table. Hence why that Vole Drive was shifted to the north.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Thank you, Guy.
Next question we received is, how was the City of Byron's 30-year comprehensive plan utilized or applied in the development of the corridor project?
Yeah, so it was reviewed. We reviewed the comprehensive plan to not only understand where they saw themselves going from a population growth perspective, but quite notably and more so with respect to potential land development or land use and how they intended to grow across their community. We utilized the comprehensive plan as a desktop reference for ourselves and then had a couple of meetings with city staff to work through their understanding of their next 10, 20, 30 years of potential growth. I'll pause there and see if Mary or Bill want to add anything on to that. That's how the comprehensive plan was utilized.
This is Bill Angerman again, city engineer. I'm not sure if Mary's going to chime in, but yeah, we had many meetings with Craig, and I think I wanted to highlight maybe way back from one of the first questions. Not only were we looking at the comp plan and future growth, but we also spent a lot of time talking about existing businesses, how existing businesses would be impacted, and how to preserve them, and what was best, what we felt as city staff for them as well.
I think both of you covered it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Bill.
We received a couple of questions related to the 10th Avenue Northeast potentially having an interchange there. So I'll read one, and I think there's two questions that could be answered based off of this. So why not put an interchange at 10th Avenue Northeast in Byron? The frontage road is the heartbeat of Byron's business district, potentially be catastrophic to customers' traffic for those businesses. It also impacts the Mayo Clinic park and ride lot by McDonald's. And the other question was asking if there was consideration or the potential for an interchange at that 10th Avenue location.
I'll start the answer on this question. It's going to be somewhat similar to my previous answer on another question. I apologize, but repetition here oftentimes is functional. Once again, a number of different access alternatives were considered as part of the analysis process and alternatives development process. Again, one of which did include, or a number of which actually, 4 of them, if I recall, that did include an interchange at 10th Avenue, and then another set of interchange or access alternatives that included not the interchange at 10th Avenue. And as just a result of not only the survey responses and information we received, just working through all of the analysis and considering a whole host of evaluation criteria, which are all documented. I think in one of my previous presentations in the June open house event, I presented the evaluation criteria as well as it's presented in our documentation online. That at the end of the day, the resultant or selected corridor long range or long-term vision for the corridor is the one that does not have that interchange. So why not put an interchange at that location? I would say, from that standpoint, just based on analysis and looking at the 3 other locations that are having the interchanges proposed, based on our analysis and review and from an evaluation standpoint, they bubble to the surface as the long-term vision that could play out best for the community overall, understanding that there are cons to them and that there are cons that significantly, or as it's commented here, may significantly impact certain aspects of things around that location. However, access is maintained under a number of different implementation measures that we have outlined here from the standpoint of whether or not some type of semblance of access is maintained through that location, either through signalized access or right in, right out into the future of 20 years or so. So for all intents and purposes, everything was done to try to maintain access at that location, so it was not lost on us the potential implications as the individual mentions here. Mary or Bill, do you want to follow up with anything on that, or any other of our partners here? Olmsted, McKay, or anyone else? Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, sure. Hi, this is Mary. Byron's City Council has for many years focused on 10th Avenue, and we've prepared that 10th Avenue was our choice. After many meetings, many discussions, many partnerships and surveys, it was decided that the best solution for Byron overall was to have 2 interchanges. And unfortunately, that didn't allow us to have 10th Avenue. Hard choices are made, and some people are impacted negatively, but we do try to do the best we can for the most. And so that's all I got.
Thanks, Mary. The next question we received is, how will proposed modifications to US 14 foster economic growth in the corridor?
Mary or Bill, I ask if either of you would like to take this initially. I have a potential way in which I might answer this question, but as being representatives of the community, Bill as the city engineer and Mary as the administrator, I wonder if you want to chime in initial?
Okay, sure, Mary will. That was a big focus. Our city engineer, every meeting we talk about with this group about how it impacts Byron and how it impacts our economic growth. So we were happy to see when County Road 5 was chosen that they were willing to consider moving the interchange south. That allowed Byron to have access to its frontage road when people came off the highway. That was really important to us. That was something we fought for and had many discussions on. Having good, clean access, safe access helps with create economic growth. This, having a decision helps Byron in ways for future growth. We've been kind of, we've had our hands tied for many years because there was no exact location. There was always what ifs. So having a decision does allow us to grow south of the highway and follow through on some potential projects that have come forward previously. Now we can say we have an answer. Bill, do you have anything to add?
No, I think you really hit it on the head there, Mary, that the certainty or moving forward is really a big item because it's always challenging when we meet with developers or existing businesses and we say that we don't have a consensus among our partners. That's probably been our biggest challenge, is lack of consensus and having this moving forward. Like you said, Mary, I think that will really help the whole corridor and growth in Byron.
Sounds like we've answered that question. The next one is someone noting that they do not see option A and B on the website. I would assume this is referring to our implementation strategies presented here in this meeting tonight. Will those be updated on the website? This board set is available for the public to review on our public involvement tab. So if you scroll down there, you can find a hyperlink to a PDF that includes this information that Craig shared here today.
Good answer, Dan.
Next, we had I guess we had a few questions related to County Road 3. So one is safety being such a priority for this project? Why are we waiting at this intersection? I believe it was stated that funds are there and available. And while we address that one, I'll work to pull up a few other questions related to that location.
Mike Schwain, if you have your ears on here, wondering if you'd like to answer that. I think I have an answer prepared for that. With you guys moving forward with the project, I wonder if you want to answer that.
Sure. This is Mike Schwain, District Traffic Engineer, and that intersection was submitted and funds have been obtained. So improving that intersection is a priority. It's a project that's been identified and programmed, and we are working towards that. Because of the way we fund projects, and we need to identify them typically 3 to 4 to 5 years in advance, there's typically lead time needed in projects. And so the funding that's been identified for that intersection is 2024. However, there's two things. MnDOT has to be coordinating and communicating with the city and the county as we look at design options. But then the second thing is we are looking at ways to try to accelerate that project and get something built there, as soon as possible, given the steps and the processes that we need to follow. Thank you.
So a way of saying that too, Mike, is that the funds are not appropriated until year 2024. You're trying to advance those funds.
And the related question is, will the frontage road on the north side of Highway 14 continue to the County Road 3 to connect to the overpass? Similarly, is that frontage road extend into Byron on the north side of 14 to get to Byron and the businesses?
I'm going to ask Bill to chime in on this one, just having the understanding of how you guys are planning your local roadway system there.
Hey, thanks, Craig. This is Bill Angerman, city engineer. How I understood the question, I'm not 100% sure, but I think the question is, will there be a frontage road between 10th Avenue, County Road 3, between Highway 14 and the railroad tracks? And the answer is no, that it is not, there's not enough room to do that. Just as a reminder, 4th Street is set to be, extended all the way to County Road 3, and the long-term plan for 7th Street is that road eventually will be widened and improved, as down the road as well.
Thank you, Bill. That's actually pretty exactly how I was going to answer. I just want to speak for you. I just happened to pull this one up to show the potential extension of 4th Street. Next question, Dan. Oh, Dan, you're muted.
Thank you, Craig.
Sorry.
Saying of 2020, right?
Yes, sir.
Am I correct in assuming that the very slow upgrade to the eventual freeway is due to the lack of funding, or are there additional or other reasons for it relating to regional planning or some other reason?
It's highly predicated on the ability to implement projects over time, right? It takes time to implement any project there's additional detailed analysis that would need to occur, environmental review. This is a U.S. state highway. There's certain processes and protocols that are necessary to get to that phase of implementing a project. So that's always first and foremost. So that takes time. And yes, funding is funding and understanding, as you just heard, I think Mike Schwain, the district traffic engineer, comment on funding being able to be appropriate, identified that in this year we can spend the funding because we have to plan our balance sheet out. It takes time to put together the money necessary to implement a project that's this is a significant undertaking, and would be, this is a significant set of projects. I mentioned earlier about 25 to 30 million in interchange. There's 3 new interchanges in addition to the one at County Road 104, plus other ancillary improvements that are necessary with local roadway improvements, etc. So it's a significant cost incurred here. I think that's the way in which I might initially answer it. I'd ask any of my partners to chime in once again if they feel as though there's anything I maybe missed or a better way to answer that. Greg, thank you.
Yeah, Craig, no, I think you answered it well. There's always the process part of it, but I do think that really the key piece here is funding. It is a very large amount of money, and the way our transportation funding is set up is basically there's dollars for maintenance of the system. There's very few dollars for expanding the system, and all of these projects would be considered an expansion of the system. So generally what has happened over I guess I've been in the district in my position about 20 years, and these major type of projects have generally been funded when there's been some kind of legislative action that increases funding for transportation and for major projects like this. That's how we're doing kind of that last 2 to 4 lane link between Owatonna and Dodge Center. The 14 4-lane expansion, now that came out of special legislative funding. So the lack of transportation funding is a major factor in why it takes a long time to get projects like this done.
Thank you, Greg. One thing I want to know, just from a housekeeping standpoint, we are at 7 o'clock. We have a number of questions that are still in the queue. I'm more than prepared and willing to answer all of our questions and work through the process. I appreciate everyone that has stayed on the line with us. I see we still have roughly 83 participants. That could very well include a few of us on this panel list here, but I think we've had a very robust, hearty conversation, and would love to keep going through here with the rest of you. So I'm assuming everyone's in agreement there. It goes without saying. Dan, please proceed.
Thanks, Craig. Yeah, I wanted to jump ahead a question to follow in line with that housekeeping, someone had noted that they joined late and was asking, this meeting will be recorded, just as a reminder to anyone who did join late, that we're recording this and we'll have it up on our project website. So you'll be able to go back and watch the full presentation along with this Q&A. And that kind of touches on a couple of questions at Highway 44 interchange, asking for just a little bit of an overview, and then specifically asking what will happen between Country Club Drive and Highway 14. Will the roadway move to the west as part of the interchange, or will the existing roadway be one that connects to 14?
So there was a lot to unpack there. I think you asked a question in that same string about 44. Is that right, Dan?
That's right. So just the Highway 44 interchange was the initial question.
Let's pause there on that one. Kay, you'd like want to take that one again?
So the thought at County Road 44 or CASA 44, or used to be 104, is that the interchange would it would actually right at the intersection itself, the bridge over 14 would be shifted just a hair to the west of where the intersection itself sits. And then, you kind of get up and over and it would transition back into the current alignment. And then as part of that, the 7th Street intersection to the east, there would be a flyover there. So like an overpass without ramps on and off, but then it would pull up and it would connect into, on the north side, it would connect into the interchange with the ramps and everything. And again, I do believe that there's a picture of that, kind of a schematic of that out on our website. It's a little bit difficult to describe because it is a little bit of a complex with the skew angle of the intersection and with the railroad being so close. But did that capture the question part of that one, Dan?
It does, and they had clarified that they're talking about that County Road 104 60th Avenue location. So
Okay.
yeah, I believe that.
Yep.
Good.
Second part of that, Dan, was, remind me again, I think it had to deal with, I think I recall, Country Club Road.
Thank you,
and
yes.
the potential extension of Country Club Road. Let me just kind of click down here real quick. It's relevant to this, and this is in concept once again, but it's relevant to the concept here. If I think I'm reading this correctly, Country Club, currently comes up and proceeds up to the north. It's being conceived as a further extension to the west and tying into County Road 5.
Thanks, Craig. The next question is asking, what are the anticipated impacts on traffic and existing commutes into and from Rochester over the next 20 years of these projects? And I guess asking if there be an expedition in having that be possible in less than 20 years as well.
Okay, I'll try to answer those two questions to get together. I see they're from the same person. One way in which the first question could be perceived is that, is there going to be a negative impact on traffic and commutes due to construction of the improvements occurring? I don't think that's the way this question is being asked. I was taking it initially to mean, is it going to improve traffic flow and commute times to and from this area? The answer to that would be yes. Removing the traffic signals and moving to more of a fully grade separated freeway style roadway will improve mobility on US Highway 14, because you won't have those stop and go aspect of the traffic signals there. The other question or comment here was, is less than 20 years possible? I think some of that was kind of asked and answered as part of our questions about potentially accelerating or doing everything all at once. That oftentimes comes back to the potential or even feasibility of implementing projects over time, just due to their sheer cost and magnitude and the number of projects that are included in this corridor. It's a fairly lengthy corridor, and so that is challenging. I would say things occurring in a quicker than a 20-year time frame for the entire vision are not likely.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks for tying it back to that earlier question as well. Is anyone considering charging stations on any of the interchange sites? This may be a question for MnDOT.
I can start. Oh,
Hello, this is I'm Heather Luke's District 6 Planning Director. You know, that is a great question because new and emerging technology is something, you know, on the forefront of our minds. And you know, this is high level, and you know, as these projects do develop down the road, you know, we may see technology aspects such as that implemented into the project in these areas. You know, that could be a consideration where a future park and ride may go.
Thanks, Heather. We received a couple of questions from an individual, a little separate, but maybe we'll be able to answer them together. Why are there full traffic lights on an interstate? And during this process, was passenger rail considered?
I'll start with the first part of that question. So well, the DOT, it transitions over time. First off, this is not technically an interstate. It's a U.S. highway by classification. I don't mean to get into semantics there. It's understood. I think the question is, why is it on a roadway that otherwise should be a freeway? That's the way I kind of interpret that question. Points well taken and understood. It's just a transition over time. The intention of the corridor, I don't want to speak for MnDOT, but Greg, there you go. Thank you. You can get ready to chime right in here that the DOT is in the process of converting much of 14 across its extent through the state. Greg, you want to tie in on that?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, you know, you get into technicalities. This isn't an interstate corridor. You know, the really the only interstate corridors we have in this area are I-90 and 35. Just like 14 isn't an interstate corridor. I mean, if they were originally, you know, we wouldn't be probably dealing with, you know, some of these issues. It would have been built as a freeway from the start. But, you know, the system was built based on, you know, what the needs were. And, you know, it's worked well for a number of years as an expressway. But with the traffic growth and the growth in the area, you know, it's I think our study shows that, you know, there is a need for a freeway vision here and fully converting this to a freeway type facility as we move into the future. I don't really have an answer, you know, as far as passenger rail. There was not really any passenger rail. I don't know if.
No, I can answer. Sorry, I forgot about that portion of it, Greg. I can answer that. So with respect to passenger rail, this project did not look at any modifications to the rail activity going along there's a rail line immediately north of here, just north of the Highway 14 alignment. We did not look at or consider potential for passenger rail along that corridor. It was not in the purview of our project. Next question, Dan. You're on mute.
Yep, thanks, Greg. This is a cost-related question. At this stage in the design, they're asking if there's a higher cost for either the County Road 5 interchange or the 104th interchange.
I'm not quite sure we can answer that question off the top of our head, Kay. I don't know if you have just getting into from a planning level, what the costs for the interchange over there at 104 are. I don't even know if you have that right now in your view.
Yep. So we've done, like Craig said, we've just done a super high level look when we've been talking with legislators about funding that interchange at 104 or Cassette 44. So our best guesstimate at this point is it's probably got a price tag around about $40 million for construction, the right of way that's associated with the interchange, with the flyover over at 7th. So yeah, so we're talking right around $40 million for that.
And Kay, would you say based on your experience, I know my answer, but would you say based on your experience, that's a complex area over there? You've got a couple of different intersections that you're including as well in that interchange. And so therefore that results in that estimate you gave.
Right. Nope, that would be one of the more complex interchange kind of things that we deal with simply because of the skew angle, because the railroad is so close. you know, that in and of itself, you've got what, 1, 2, 3, like 4 or 5 bridge structures. There's likely to be some retaining walls associated with that. So yeah, yep, that's a spendy interchange.
And I think to kind of counterbalance that or give perspective, I think the question was about County 5 interchange and which one was more expensive. As you can imagine, with County 5, there's a significant realignment of the mainline highway included in that interchange. So it's not only just the interchange itself, it's also that mainline alignment cost associated with it. And I think we were roughly in the $40 to $44 million range at a high level planning level estimate as well for this location.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks, Kay. I just wanted to note we had a few comments come in. So we appreciate those comments. I won't read those here, but just I'll appreciate the positive notes and appreciation for this meeting. So I see 2 questions remaining in our Q&A. The next one is related to safety on the US 14 corridor. Will there be funding for our community members for grief counseling, those first responders, firemen, police officers, who are the ones on the scenes watching and witnessing community members being hurt and passing away?
I will take a Kay, you want to address that? So your mic came off.
Oh, nope, sorry,
Oh,
I just
sorry.
have to mute again. Go ahead.
No worries, no worries. I'll start to address the question. I know I can't very well answer this question. The comment, I'm just kind of order my thoughts here as I see this once again. This was relevant to just, are there going to be funds put toward grief counseling for unsafe situations that continue to occur on 14? I'm paraphrasing because this is how I'm receiving the question. As you can imagine, our project is moving forward with trying to identify and conduct an analysis of not only the existing conditions, but an understanding of how we can affect hopefully positive change in the grand scheme of everything included with what we're proposing. And that it's never lost on us that things that have occurred in the past, there's no dial I can touch that would ever change anything that's already occurred. And there's nothing I can say there. So at this point, this project is moving forward on transportation improvements and how those improvements can hopefully affect positive change on the corridor, but not to the extent as the question kind of asks. Anyone else want to chime in on that one? And if not, let's say move on to the next question, Dan.
I'll just chime in briefly, please.
Thanks,
This
Mike.
is Mike Schwinn, traffic engineer. And what's interesting is throughout the district at other locations, we do get concerns and maybe even anger, expressed by the emergency responders. We finally were able to build a roundabout up in Wanamingo, but we had a volunteer firefighter up there who was emergency responder, and he was, very upset. He's like, "What's taken so long? Why do we have to put up with this?" Because he's tired of getting called out there. Also on Highway 61 along the Mississippi River, we had a volunteer firefighter who felt that we were having more than necessary or more than what would be expected, ice-related crashes. And he was very upset because of, just the trauma of having to go upon the scene, the trauma of trying to care for people. It is devastating. And I think what's lost on the general public is these crashes that happen. They're disgusting. They're terrible. They can turn multiple families' lives upside down. They take resources in terms of public resources for the emergency responders, but then in terms of the trauma and the PTSD that might be easily experienced by the emergency responders, it's a serious issue. And probably none of us have been upon a scene like that ourselves, or specifically had to treat these people. My father was a firefighter, professional firefighter for 32 years, and he has spent time, dealing with not only the victims, but the survivors. And so it is not a light subject. And so I respect and understand your desire for getting this stuff done, not constantly planning things. And that's what we're trying to do here. And I'm very pleased that this progress has been made. So more positive direct steps can be moved forward, provided the funding and the urgency. Thank you.
Thanks for that comment. The other question that we received is Highway 52 through Rochester is a high-speed corridor with at least 2 accesses less than 6 blocks apart. Why would 2 accesses a mile apart be a problem, referring to County Road 5 and 10th Avenue?
Mike, I don't know if you want to chime in on this one as well. I'll start with the access spacing recommendations and considerations that we went into with respect to this particular project regarding 52. You know, the land use developments in that area present themselves differently than in this particular area to some extent. But I'm going to start my answer by starting off with, you know, as we get into the analysis process here and looking at where we have our existing access locations, was referenced in looking at where future development from a comprehensive plan standpoint may occur, and then trying to understand, wanting to transition to a full freeway corridor, what we have for access management recommendations and standards. We try to achieve our standard and then work from there to modify or look for variances where we can still achieve safe, functional mobility situations. And in this particular condition, having those interchanges, and I'm not sure exactly which one specifically you're referencing, if it was something on the order of, you know, having one at 10th and having one at 5, or where that question might have been going. That just wasn't a palatable situation from an interchange access spacing standpoint for this project. Mike or others, I'm not sure if you want to chime in, not to shine a light on you, Mike, I just know being the district traffic engineer.
I think I'll reserve, you know, further comment on that. Unless, yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, that is a full summation of the questions that we received. Again, I had mentioned, appreciate the comments that are there. We will be taking these in and including them as part of our comment log for this open house process. Wanted to also note that if anyone had any last second questions to add to the Q&A, please feel free to do so. If questions arise after reviewing materials, we encourage you to, you have a couple of options available. Either enter a comment directly on our website with the comment form there. You could also print that comment form and mail it back to us. We have our address right on that form. We're open and taking responses, comments, and questions through Thursday, December 17th, 2 weeks from today. And so please don't hesitate to reach out via email or via letter if you have other questions. Again, I would just recap by saying that we'll be sure to post this recording and share the information discussed here today on our website as soon as we can. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, Craig.
Thank you very much, Dan. With that said, once again, I can't state enough how much we appreciate your participation, not only this evening, but throughout the project process. I know, or I imagine many of the participants this evening are folks that have been with us along the entire way. And that goes from being with us on the first night where we were able to shake a hand and say hello and share a cookie. We always tend to bring cookies to our events with a bottle of water or whatnot, but, you know, get a little face-to-face interaction and talk through your issues and needs. And we were able to do that in October. Coming then around to transitioning to being here in 2020 and having the response and participation and momentum that we were able to achieve with this project, I really appreciate it. I mean, the public participation on any project is always something that's extremely important. It's bedrock to how we get projects done. This being a planning project, nonetheless, does not take away from whether or not it gets built today, tomorrow, or 20 years from now. It's part of the process, and we truly appreciate your participation in it. I think that's all I kind of wanted to say, Dan. I don't know. I'd open it up for my partner here, Kay Bieniak, if you have some closing comments as well, Kay.
Nope. I would just like to, on behalf of Olmsted County and our project partners, thanks for your attendance tonight and your engagement, and we appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Have a safe, happy, and healthy evening. Go ahead, Dan, for closure.
Yep. I was just going to say good night, and we will be signing off.